During the Halloween party, they put a witch's hat on me to mock me. When my son arrived and read the will, the silence was total. And that night in Manhattan, as the rain hammered against the windows of my Upper West Side apartment, I understood that I had raised my own executioners. Today, I am going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep venting. It was 8 o'clock on the night of October 31st. My apartment smelled of fresh-baked brownies and gourmet hot cocoa. I had spent the entire week preparing the Halloween party for my grandchildren. Orange string lights hung from the ceiling like small warm moons, and carved jack-o'-lanterns smiled from every corner with a cheer I hadn't felt in years. I wore my navy blue dress, the one that made me feel elegant. My gray hair, freshly styled at Ms. Gloria's salon, gleamed under the gold dining room lights. At 68, I still made an effort to look presentable for them. Always for them. I had invested over $1,000 in this party. The costumes for my 4 grandchildren cost $250 each. Ethan, my eldest son, had texted me, "Mom, make sure they're nice costumes, okay? The other parents at school will be looking." And I, as always, complied. As I have always complied. In my bank account, the numbers kept dropping. But my savings, built over 40 years working as an accountant for the city finance department, still allowed me these expenses. My late husband, George, had left behind a small estate that included this apartment in the center of the city and some modest but steady dividend-generating fund investments. The dining table was covered with delicacies, an elaborate charcuterie board, homemade spinach dip, elegant mini quiches I had been making since 5 that morning, and desserts that would have made any child cry with excitement. Every dish had been prepared with love I no longer expected to be returned, but which I still didn't know how to stop giving. When they arrived, the apartment filled with voices and footsteps. First, Ethan with his wife, Lauren, and their 8-year-old twin sons, Liam and Noah. Then Scott, my younger son, with his wife, Tiffany, and their teenage daughters, Chloe and Sarah. The children ran straight for the candy without even glancing at me. The adults poured wine and started their conversations as if I were part of the furniture. "Grandma, where are our presents?" asked Liam, one of the twins, while chewing a quiche without a thank you. "On the hallway table, sweetie," I replied with a smile that hurt my cheeks. Not even thanks. Not even, "Hello, Grandma." Just demands. And I, as always, complied. Scott walked over to the cabinet where I kept my best liquor, took my bottle of premium Scotch whiskey, the one George had bought for special occasions and which cost more than Scott imagined, and poured himself a measure as if he were in his own home. "This is good, Mom." "Expensive?" he asked without really expecting an answer. "It was George's. He was saving it for special moments," I murmured. "Well, what better moment than this?" he said, raising the glass toward his brother. "To Dad, rest in peace." They toasted. No one included me in the toast for my own husband. Lauren, who always had that way of smiling with her lips but not her eyes, approached the sweets table, examining every detail like a quality inspector. "Eleanor, these brownies are a little dry, aren't they?" she commented, taking one and biting into it with exaggerated difficulty. "Maybe next time you could just buy them. There's a wonderful bakery near Ethan's office." The words pierced me like tiny daggers wrapped in velvet. I had woken up before dawn to make those brownies. My arthritic hands had beaten the batter for half an hour, but for her they were simply dry. "I'll buy them next time," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Exactly. At your age, you don't have to strain yourself so much," she added with that smile she had perfected during the 15 years she'd been married to my son. "We understand you don't have the energy you used to." Ethan, my firstborn, the child I had nursed through pneumonia at 5, for whom I had worked double shifts to pay for private college, nodded indifferently while checking his cell phone. "Mom, by the way," he said without looking up from the screen, "could we borrow your car this weekend? Ours is in the shop, and we need to go to the Hamptons to see Lauren's parents." The car, my reliable Toyota Camry that I had bought 3 years ago with part of George's inheritance. The only thing that gave me independence to go to the market, the doctor, or Mass on Sundays. It's just that I have a cardiologist appointment on Monday, I started to explain. Can't you take a cab? I mean, you live downtown? Lauren interrupted. We really need it. And then it happened. Scott, who had been rummaging through the hall closet where I keep coats, emerged with something in his hands that chilled my blood. It was a black, pointed, cheap felt witch hat I had bought for decoration. It wasn't a costume for me. It was just decor. Look what I found, Scott yelled, holding the hat up like a trophy. The perfect costume for Mom. Oh, that's hilarious, Lauren shrieked, clapping. Put it on, Eleanor, you'll be perfect. No, really, I don't. I tried to protest. But Scott was already upon me. With a smile he thought was funny but which felt cruel, he placed the hat over my freshly styled hair. He jammed it down hard, as if branding cattle. There she is, the most authentic witch in the whole city, he declared, as the others burst into laughter. Lauren took out her cell phone and started taking pictures of me. Don't move, mother-in-law. This is going straight to the family group chat. The cousins are going to die laughing. I wanted to take the hat off. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I had spent 5 weeks preparing this damned party, that I had spent my savings, that I had cooked until my hands ached, that I had cleaned the house until it shone, but I couldn't. I stood there, paralyzed in the middle of my own living room, wearing a witch hat I hadn't chosen, being photographed as an object of ridicule by the people I loved most in the world. And in that moment, as I listened to their laughter bouncing off the walls of the apartment I had paid for, where I fed them food I had cooked, something broke inside me. It wasn't my heart. That had been breaking into pieces for years. It was something deeper. It was my dignity that finally said, enough. But that night, I didn't know it yet. That night, I still smiled and let them take the photos. I still believed that love was earned through sacrifice and humiliation. How wrong I was. The following week was like walking barefoot over broken glass. Every morning, I woke up with the echo of those laughs ringing in my ears, with the image of Lauren holding up the phone, capturing my humiliation for the extended family to see and comment on in their group chats. On Monday, while having my coffee in the same blue porcelain cup I had used for 20 years, the phone rang. It was my sister, Diane, who lives in Florida. Eleanor, I saw the pictures in the family group, she said, with that voice she used when she wanted to sound casual but was clearly uncomfortable. You looked fun. That word landed like lead in my stomach. Fun? I repeated, feeling the humiliation now extending even to my sister. Well, you know, these young people and their jokes. At least they included you in the party, right? I hung up without saying goodbye. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my sister. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. Review my finances. I sat at George's desk, where I still kept all the important documents, and spread out all my bank statements, the apartment deeds, and the investment fund certificates that my husband had meticulously organized on the mahogany table. The Upper West Side apartment was worth approximately $1.5 million according to the last appraisal. The investment funds totaled $350,000. I also had $150,000 in a savings account that generated minimal interest, plus some stocks in U.S. companies that George had bought years ago when the market was high. In total, my liquid net worth amounted to well over $2 million. $2 million built on a lifetime of work. My 40 years as an accountant, George's meticulous savings as an engineer, prudent investments, the home we had paid for penny by penny over 25 years. And yet, there I was, being treated like a foolish old woman who didn't deserve even basic respect. I then recalled the conversation from the previous week, when Ethan had asked me for help with the down payment on his new house in Darien, Connecticut. Mom, we only need $75,000. It's a safe investment. The house will appreciate. We'll pay you back in 2 years with interest. I had given him the money without question, because he was my son. Because I believed that helping family with my capital was the right thing to do. And I also remembered when Scott lost his job last year. 3 months of paying his rent, bills, and his daughter's expenses. $30,000 that came out of my dividends, with him never mentioning repayment. It's the least you can do, Mom, he had told me when I gave him the last check. After all, you have more money than you can spend. More money than I can spend. As if my fortune were something I didn't deserve, something I should distribute without expecting even a thank you. On Wednesday morning, while watering the geraniums on the balcony overlooking Central Park West, I heard familiar voices on the sidewalk. It was Lauren and Tiffany, my son's wives, walking together toward the subway laden with shopping bags. She has an apartment in the heart of Manhattan and complains she can't buy this or that, Lauren was saying in that nasal voice that grated on my nerves. Exactly. And then she makes us feel guilty when we ask her for help, Tiffany replied. As if we weren't family. They stopped right beneath my balcony. They hadn't seen me. Besides, at her age, why does she need so much money? It's not like she's going to buy a sports car or travel the world, Lauren continued. At least we use it for the kids, for the future. My mom says it's just old lady miserliness, Tiffany added, adjusting her new designer handbag that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She's just getting stingy in her old age. Stingy, miserly, old lady. I moved away from the balcony before they could see me, but their words followed me like a toxic cloud throughout the apartment. Miserly? Me, who had spent $1,000 on their Halloween party? Me, who had paid for the family vacation to Cape Cod last summer? Me, who whenever I went to the supermarket bought things just in case they stopped by, and filled my fridge with their favorite meals? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the bed I had shared with George for 38 years, staring at the ceiling and wondering when I had stopped being a person and become a source of funds. On Thursday, Ethan called me. Mom, can we stop by your place Friday? Lauren wants to show you some furniture catalogs. We're redecorating the house and thought you could help us choose. Of course, dear, I replied automatically. Great. Oh, and by the way, could you make that amazing slow-cooked pot roast you do? The kids have been asking for Grandma's roast all week. The amazing pot roast. The one that requires expensive cuts of meat, hours of slow cooking, and an entire day of preparation. The one that costs well over $100 to make for 8 people. Sure, I said. I'll make it. You're the best, Mom. We'll see you Friday at 2. He hung up without giving me a chance to ask anything else. As always. On Friday, they arrived punctually, but not to dine together as a family. They arrived for me to serve them while they reviewed furniture catalogs that cost more than my annual retirement income. Look at this sofa, mother-in-law, Lauren said, pointing to an image in the catalog while I served the pot roast on deep ceramic plates. Doesn't it look perfect for our living room? The sofa cost $15,000. $15,000 for a piece of furniture. It's very nice, I murmured, placing the plate in front of her. The thing is, with the house down payment and everything, our capital is a little tight right now, she continued, without even touching the food I had just served her. But Ethan said you could help us with the first payment. It's only $5,000. Ethan was quietly chewing, as if he hadn't heard his wife ask me for money for luxury furniture while I was still standing, serving like a domestic employee. $5,000? I asked, feeling my voice tremble. This sofa is going to last a lifetime, Mom. Ethan finally intervened. It's an investment in the home where your grandchildren will grow up, where you'll come to visit us, where I'll come to visit them, as if I were a guest in my own children's lives. I'll see, was all I could say. Lauren exchanged a look with Ethan, a look that clearly indicated they expected an immediate positive answer. Mom. Ethan put down his fork and looked at me with that expression he used when he was a child and wanted something very specific. You know we wouldn't ask for anything if it wasn't important. And you know we always pay you back. A lie. They had never paid me back anything. The $75,000 for the down payment was still a promise hanging in the air. The $30,000 I had given Scott had evaporated as if it had never existed. I've had a lot of expenses lately, I said, trying to sound firm but reasonable. What expenses could you possibly have, Mom? Ethan's voice became slightly impatient. You live alone. You don't have a car to maintain since you lent us yours. You don't travel. I don't have a car to maintain, because I had lent it to them indefinitely. I don't travel because every time I save money for a small trip, some family emergency arises that requires my financial help. Doctors, medicines. I began to explain. Please, Mom. Medicare covers all that, Lauren interrupted me. Don't make us feel bad for asking for help. We're family. Family. That word they had turned into a weapon, a unidirectional obligation that only worked when they needed something from me. I finally sat down at my own table, with my own pot roast that was cooling, while I became the villain of the story for not immediately handing over my money so they could buy luxury furniture. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I simply said, no. The idea terrified me as much as it liberated me. The word no floated in my mind all the following week, like a forbidden melody I couldn't stop humming. Every time I thought it, I felt a strange mix of panic and relief, as if I were contemplating jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water or rocks at the bottom. The following Tuesday, while organizing the week's medications in my blue pill box, the phone rang. It was Scott. Mom, I have fantastic news. His voice was livelier than I had heard it in months. Remember my friend Chris, who worked at the bank? Well, he offered me an incredible business deal. A Bitcoin investment opportunity that could triple the money in 6 months. Bitcoin. A word I had heard on the news but which sounded as abstract as space travel. I only need $40,000 to get in, Scott continued without pause. It's a minimum amount, but Chris says less isn't worth it. Mom, this is our chance to secure the girl's future. Our chance. As if I were a partner in my younger son's financial dreams. Scott, I don't understand anything about those things, I began. That's why, Mom. You don't have to understand. I'll handle everything. I just need you to transfer the money. I promise that in 6 months I'll give you back $80,000. That's double what you're loaning. $40,000. The amount made me feel dizzy. It was more than I had spent on the entire apartment in the last year. That's a lot of money, son. Mom, please. Don't be one of those stingy old women who die with cash sitting in the bank. His tone became impatient, almost cruel. You have over $2 million just sitting there doing nothing. $40,000 is nothing to you. Stingy old women. The same words I had heard Tiffany use to describe her own mother. I need to think about it, I said, feeling my voice grow smaller. Think about what? Are you seriously going to doubt your own son? Scott now sounded hurt, as if my hesitation were a personal betrayal. You know what? Forget it. I knew I couldn't count on you. I'll ask Tiffany to talk to her parents. And he hung up. I was left with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone like the sound of my relationship with my younger son disintegrating in real time. Tiffany talked to her parents, as if they were more family than I was, as if they had more obligation to help my son than his own mother. That night, sitting in my green velvet armchair in front of the TV, I tried to watch my favorite cable drama, but I couldn't concentrate. Scott's words echoed in my head. Stingy old women who die with cash sitting in the bank. Was that what I was? A stingy old woman? I thought of all the years I had worked. 40 years waking up at 6 in the morning, taking the subway to the city finance department, sitting in front of a calculator and mountains of invoices, reviewing municipal budgets until my eyes hurt. 40 years saving every dollar, buying clothes on sale, cooking at home instead of eating out, postponing vacations to pay the mortgage on this apartment where I now felt like a prisoner of my own generosity. And George, my George, working double shifts at the construction company, coming home with rough hands and a sore back, but always with a smile when he showed me the status of our savings accounts. For our children, Eleanor, so they can have a better future than ours. A better future. Was this what we had built? Children who viewed our sacrifices as an entitlement? On Friday, when I went to the local market as I did every week, I ran into Diane, my old coworker. She was sitting on the cafe terrace, drinking a latte and reading a travel magazine. Eleanor, how are you, woman? She called out, waving her hand for me to approach. Diane had been widowed the same year as me, but her face had a light that mine had lost long ago. She looked free. Sit down for a moment, she said, pulling up a chair. Tell me about the grandkids. I sat down and ordered a coffee, but when I tried to talk about my grandchildren, I realized I had nothing good to share. They didn't call unless they needed something. They didn't visit unless their parents brought them. When they were at my house, they spent their time on their cell phones, answering in monosyllables when I asked about school. The truth is, They're very busy with their own things, was all I could say. Diane looked at me with that expression I knew well, the same one she used when reviewing numbers on a budget that didn't balance. Eleanor, can I ask you something personal? I nodded. When was the last time you did something just for you? Something that made you happy, without thinking about anyone else? The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. I tried to remember, to search my recent memory for some moment of personal joy, some decision made out of pure self-pleasure. I found nothing. I don't know, I finally admitted. Because the same thing happened to me, Diane continued, stirring her latte. After Paul died, I realized I had spent 30 years living for others. For him, for the kids, for the grandkids. And when I was left alone, I didn't know who I was without all those roles. She showed me the magazine she was reading. It was about Greece, full of photos of blue and white islands. Next month I'm going to Santorini, alone. 15 days of not cooking for anyone, not worrying if anyone needs anything, not being tied to the phone waiting for the next family emergency. Alone? The idea seemed both terrifying and fascinating. Alone and happy. Do you know how much it cost me to realize I could be happy without constantly being available for everyone else? I walked back home with Diane's words bouncing in my head like ping-pong balls. When I arrived, I found 3 missed calls from Ethan and a text message that said, "Mom, call me urgent." I called him immediately, my heart racing. Had something happened to one of the kids? An accident? "Mom, thank goodness you called." His voice sounded agitated. "We have a problem. The bank denied us the loan for the new kitchen. Apparently our debt level is already at the limit. The new kitchen, another renovation, another expense. But don't worry," Ethan continued. "We've found a solution. If you co-signed a $50,000 loan, we could get the money. We just need you to put the apartment up as collateral. My apartment as collateral. The home George and I had paid for over 25 years. The place where all our memories were, where I had raised my children, where I had cared for George during his last illness. Ethan, I don't understand. What exactly does that mean?" "It means we sign some papers, and you help us get the loan. It's just a formality, Mom. A technicality." But something in his tone made me suspicious. That way of speaking fast, of minimizing the importance of what he was asking. "And what if you can't pay?" An awkward silence ensued on the other end of the line. "Mom, are you seriously asking me that? Of course we'll be able to pay. It's just that we temporarily need your help. But hypothetically nothing, Mom. Either you trust us or you don't trust us. It's that simple. Simple. Everything was simple for them. Simple to ask me for money. Simple to use my home as collateral for their whims. Simple to make me feel guilty for having reasonable doubts." That night, I went to bed without having given Ethan an answer. For the first time in years, I had not immediately yielded to a request from my children. And for the first time in years, I slept soundly. But the next day, I woke up to 20 missed calls from Lauren and a voicemail that chilled my blood. "Eleanor, I don't know what's wrong with you lately, but Ethan is devastated. He can't believe his own mother would doubt him like this. I hope you reconsider and remember what it means to be a mother. Remember what it means to be a mother." As if I needed her to remind me after 40 years of raising their husbands. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never experienced toward my own children. Rage. Pure, clean, liberating rage. And with that rage came a clarity that had been years in the making. They didn't love me. They needed me, they used me, they manipulated me, but they didn't love me. And that truth, as painful as it was, finally made me free to stop loving them in the destructive way I had been doing. It was time to learn to say that word I had been practicing in silence for weeks. No. The word no came out of my mouth for the first time on a Tuesday morning, as Ethan waited on the phone for my answer about the apartment collateral. It sounded strange, as if another person had pronounced it using my voice. "No, Ethan. I am not going to put my apartment up as collateral." The silence that followed was so profound, I thought the call had disconnected. "Pardon?" His voice sounded genuinely confused, as if he had misheard. I said no. "Mom, I don't understand. We talked yesterday and you said you'd think about it." "I did think about it. And the answer is no." Another silence. Then a nervous laugh. "Okay, If it's about the money, we can talk about a different payment plan, or we can reduce the amount. It doesn't have to be $50,000. It's not about the money, Ethan. It's because I don't want to do it. The line remained silent for so long that I finally hung up. My hands were shaking when I put the phone down on the kitchen table. I had said no to my son for the first time in 40 years, and the world hadn't ended. The sun was still shining through the lace curtains. The geraniums on the balcony still needed watering, and I was still breathing. But the peace lasted exactly 3 hours. The doorbell rang with such insistence that I thought there was an emergency. I opened the door and found Ethan, Lauren, Scott, and Tiffany standing on the landing like an official delegation of offended relatives. "We need to talk," Ethan said, pushing the door open and walking in without waiting for an invitation. The others followed him. In seconds, my living room was filled with raised voices and reproving faces. I sat down in my green armchair while they distributed themselves on the sofa and chairs as if it were a family intervention. "Mom?" Scott began in that voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "We're worried about you." "Very worried," Tiffany added, nodding with exaggerated gravity. "It's just that lately you've been acting very strange," Lauren continued. "You're not the same person you used to be." "Strange in what sense?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Strange as in refusing to help your own family," Ethan said. His tone was one of disappointment, as if he were the one entitled to be hurt. "Ethan, I've helped you for years." "Exactly," Scott interrupted me. "For years you've been the perfect mother, always willing to support us. And now suddenly you refuse a simple favor. Simple favor. Putting my home up as collateral so they could get further into debt. Maybe you should see a doctor," Tiffany suggested with false concern. "Sometimes, at a certain age, people start to become distrustful, paranoid." "Paranoid?" I repeated, feeling the rage I had discovered the day before begin to boil again. "She doesn't mean anything bad," Lauren quickly intervened. "It's just that this sudden change in your personality, it's not normal. The normal thing would be for me to continue giving you money without questioning anything," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how firm it sounded. "It's not giving, Mom," Ethan exploded. "It's investing in your family, in your grandchildren's future." "Investing?" I stood up from my chair. "Was the $75,000 I gave Ethan for his house down payment an investment? Was the $30,000 I gave Scott when he lost his job an investment? Was the $1,000 for the Halloween party an investment?" "That's different," Scott began. "Different how?" My voice rose higher than I had intended. "When was the last time any of you paid back even $1? When was the last time you asked me how I was without asking for something immediately afterwards?" "But we always ask how you are," Lauren protested. "Yes, and when I tell you my back hurts or that I feel lonely, you immediately change the subject." They looked at each other with those faces they wore when they thought I was exaggerating. "Mom!" Ethan approached and placed his hands on my shoulders with that condescension he had perfected over the past few years. "I understand you're feeling a little sensitive lately. Maybe it's just stress, or the fact that Dad is no longer here." "Don't mention your father," I said, pulling away from his hands. "Your father would never have used my pain to manipulate me." "We're not manipulating you," Scott yelled. "We're asking for help. There's a difference." "Really? Because when I told you no, you immediately came here to tell me I'm sick, that I'm not normal, that I need to see a doctor." "We really think you need professional help," Tiffany insisted. "This behavior is not like you." She was right. It wasn't like me. The old Eleanor would have yielded by now, apologized for worrying them, and signed whatever paper they put in front of her. "You're right," I finally said. "It is not like me." Their faces relaxed, thinking they had won. "What was like me was being an idiot," I continued. "It was letting you treat me like an ATM with legs. It was smiling while you humiliated me at my own parties." "Mom, no one humiliated you," Ethan started. "Were the photos with the witch hat not humiliation? Is calling me stingy when I spend my savings on you not humiliation? Is saying that at my age I don't need money while you plan how to spend it not humiliation?" "You are taking everything out of context," Lauren protested. "Am I? Because I have a very simple question for you." I sat back down in my armchair, but this time I felt like a queen on her throne. When was the last time any of you called me just to say you love me? Without asking for anything, without needing anything, just to tell me you love me. The silence that followed was deafening. Of course we love you, Scott stammered. When was the last time you invited me to dinner at your homes? When was the last time you bought me a gift without it being my birthday? When was the last time you cared about how I sleep? What frightens me? What makes me happy? More silence. Exactly, I said, feeling strangely calm. Because you don't love me. You love what I can do for you. That's not true, Ethan shouted, but his voice sounded hollow. Then prove it, I told them. Leave my apartment right now. Don't ask me for anything for a month. No money, no favors, no babysitting. Just call me to check in. Come visit without needing anything. Prove to me that you love me for who I am, not for what I have. And they looked at each other as if I had proposed something completely absurd. Mom, you're being so dramatic, Tiffany began. Dramatic? Asking my children to show me they love me without involving money is dramatic? It's just that we obviously love you, Lauren mumbled. Then you'll have no problem with my proposal. The tension in the room was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Finally, Ethan stood up. Fine, Mom. If that's what you need to feel better, we'll do it. But I hope that when you get over this phase, you remember who we really are. The others followed him toward the door. Tiffany was the last one out, and before closing it, she turned to me. You know this is going to end badly, right, Eleanor? Kids aren't perfect, but they're still your only family. She closed the door softly, and for the first time in decades, my apartment filled with a silence that didn't terrify me. I poured myself a glass of the wine that George kept for special occasions, the one we had never drunk because there never seemed to be an occasion special enough, and toasted myself. To the first time I tell the truth, I murmured to the empty air. The wine tasted like freedom, but I knew this was only the beginning. I knew my children well enough to know they wouldn't give up so easily. The money I represented was too important to them. The war had just begun, and for the first time in my life, I felt like fighting. The next 3 days were the quietest I had lived in years. Not a call, not a text, not even one of those surprise visits they usually made when they needed something urgent. It was as if I had disappeared from the family map, and strangely enough, I felt more alive than ever. On Wednesday morning, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I woke up without rushing. There was no one expecting me to have breakfast ready. No morning calls asking if I could watch a sick grandchild. No urgent texts about some new financial crisis requiring my immediate economic intervention. I made myself coffee in my favorite mug, the blue one with flowers that had been my mother's, and sat on the balcony watching life pass by on Central Park West. Manhattanites rushed toward the subway with their morning hustle. Merchants opened their shops. Mothers took their children to school. A world that worked perfectly without me having to solve, pay for, or fix anything. It was then that I decided to make my first major purchase just for myself in over a decade. I walked to Bloomingdale's on 59th Street, something I had always done with specific purpose. Buying gifts for others, looking for deals on practical clothes, or accompanying Lauren on her shopping sprees where I ended up paying for half her whims. But this time, I went in without a list, without a budget, with no other intention than to pamper myself. In the perfume section, I stopped in front of a counter that sparkled like a jewelry store. The saleswoman, a young woman with a genuine smile, asked if I was looking for something specific. I want a perfume that makes me feel different, I told her, surprising myself with the honesty. She let me smell different fragrances. Some were too sweet, others too intense. But when we arrived at a cut crystal bottle with an aroma that blended jasmine with woody notes, I knew it was the right one. This one is $200, the saleswoman warned me, perhaps thinking the price would make me back out. $200. What previously would have been a fortune for a personal whim now seemed like a reasonable investment in my own happiness. I pulled out my card without hesitation. I'll take it. Then I bought a silk ivory blouse that cost more than I usually spent on clothes all year, and a pair of mid-heel shoes that made me feel elegant instead of just practical. When I got home loaded with bags with my name on them, not the names of my children or grandchildren, I felt like a stranger in my own life. A stranger I liked much more than the woman I had been until a week ago. On Thursday evening, while eating a fresh salad instead of the heavy stews I used to cook because men like hearty food, the phone rang. It was Chloe, my 16-year-old granddaughter. Grandma. Her voice sounded small and nervous. Can you talk? Of course, sweetie. How are you? I'm confused. She was silent for a moment. My parents say you've become selfish and don't want to help the family anymore. But I don't understand what happened. My heart sank. Of course, they had involved the grandchildren in their manipulation campaign. What exactly did they tell you, Chloe? That you said no to Uncle Ethan when he asked for help with their house, and that now you don't want anyone to call you because you're mad at all of us. I took a deep breath. This was my chance to show at least one of my grandchildren a different version of events. Chloe, can I ask you something? When you come to my apartment, what do you like doing most with me? I like when you tell me stories about when you were young, and when you teach me how to cook those cookies great-grandma used to make, and when you let me choose the movie we watch together. And do you know why I love doing those things with you so much? Because you like me? Because I love you, Chloe, and I enjoy your company. Not because I need anything from you, but because you are a wonderful person I like spending time with. She was silent on the other end. Now tell me, I continued, when was the last time your parents visited me just to spend time with me? Without asking for money, without needing me to babysit someone, without wanting me to solve some problem for them. Another long silence. I don't know, Grandma. There's always something. Exactly. There's always something. And I got tired of only being useful to the people I love. I want to be loved for who I am, not for what I can give. But, does that mean you don't love us anymore? Oh, sweetie. I felt my voice break. It means I love you enough to stop allowing you to treat me badly. Because when you allow people to treat you poorly, you are teaching them that it's okay to do it. I don't understand. Imagine you have a friend who only calls you when she needs you to do her homework. How would that make you feel? I would feel used. That's how I have felt for years. And I finally decided I deserve better. Chloe was silent for so long I thought she had hung up. Grandma, she finally said, can I come see you this weekend? Just me, without my parents. Just to be with you. Tears ran down my cheeks. I would love that, sweetie. I would love that. After hanging up, I realized Chloe had done something none of my children had done in years. She had asked me how I felt, and she had truly listened to my answer. On Friday morning, I decided to take the next step in my new life. I called the bank and requested an appointment with the branch manager. Mr. David Sterling was a man in his 50s who had known me for decades. He had managed George's and my accounts since we moved into the neighborhood. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, he said when I entered his office. It's good to see you. How can I help? I want to make some changes to my accounts, I told him, sitting across from his desk with a confidence that surprised me. I want to put all my investments under my exclusive control, and I want to change the beneficiaries of my will. Mr. Sterling raised his eyebrows. May I ask the reason? You may ask, but I'm not obligated to explain, I replied with a smile. I just want to ensure my estate is protected and that I am the only one who can make decisions about it. Of course, that is your right. And the new beneficiaries? I want to create a foundation for older women who find themselves in situations of family vulnerability. As Mr. Sterling prepared the papers, I felt like I was writing the first chapter of a completely new story. A story where I was the protagonist, not the victim. One more thing, I said before leaving. If anyone in my family asks about my finances or attempts to access information about my accounts, they are not authorized. Only me. Understood, Mrs. Vance. Is everything okay at home? Everything is better than ever, Mr. Sterling. For the first time in years. That afternoon, when I arrived home with all the documents signed and sealed, I found a bouquet of flowers at my door. There was no card, but I immediately recognized the style. Expensive red roses. The kind Ethan usually bought me when he had done something particularly bad and needed my forgiveness. I left them in the hallway. I didn't need flowers bought with guilt. What I needed was respect, and that couldn't be bought at any florist. For the first time in 68 years, I was learning the difference between being loved and being useful, and the difference was revolutionary. On Saturday morning, while preparing chocolate chip cookies for Chloe's visit, I heard the unmistakable noise of several people climbing the building's stairs. Heavy steps, agitated voices, the sound of keys clanking against metal. I peeked through the peephole and saw what I had been expecting. The entire family, including all 4 grandchildren. This time they brought reinforcements. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. "Good morning," I said with a calm that surprised me. "To what do I owe the honor of this very massive visit?" Ethan was in front, with that determined look he wore when he thought he was going to get what he wanted. Behind him, Lauren was carrying Noah, even though the boy was 8 years old and perfectly capable of walking. Scott and Tiffany flanked the group, holding the girls' hands. "Mom, we need to talk," Ethan said, gently pushing the door open. "All of us, as a family." "Including the children?" I asked, looking at the confused little faces of my grandchildren. "Especially including the children," Lauren intervened with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to sound maternal. "Because they are also part of this family, and they have the right to understand why their grandmother is rejecting them." I let them in, but this time I didn't rush to the kitchen to make coffee or take out cookies. I sat in my armchair and waited. "Grandma," Liam, the more outspoken twin, began, "is it true that you don't love us anymore?" The question pierced me like an arrow. I looked at Ethan, who had the expression of someone who had carefully rehearsed this scene. "Who told you that, sweetie?" "Dad says you're mad at us because we don't visit enough," the boy continued, with that devastating honesty only children possess. "And that's why you don't want to help us anymore." "Liam?" I knelt down to his level. "I love you more than anything in the world. But loving someone doesn't mean doing everything they ask without questioning anything." "But grandparents always help their families," interjected Sarah, the older granddaughter. "My friend Madison says her grandma buys her everything she wants." "And do you think that's love?" I asked her. "Someone buying you everything you want?" The girl looked thoughtful. "Sarah," Tiffany continued, placing her hands on her daughter's shoulders, "tell Grandma what we talked about in the car. Mom says that grandparents who truly love their grandchildren don't leave them without the things they need." Sarah recited as if she had memorized the words. I felt a wave of nausea. They were using the children as emotional shields, teaching them that love is measured in dollars and that I was the villain for not financing their whims. "And what is it you need that I am not giving you?" I asked, addressing both the children and the adults. "Well," Ethan cleared his throat, "the children need stability. And when their parents can't provide certain things because their grandmother refuses to help—" "What things exactly?" I interrupted. "Food, clothing, education." "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Scott sighed. "You know what we mean." "No, I don't. Tell me clearly." "Things like, well, Ethan's new kitchen is important for the family. The kids need a modern space where—" "The kids need a $50,000 kitchen," I repeated slowly. Noah, who until now had been quiet in Lauren's arms, got down and approached me. "Grandma, do you have a lot of money?" The question stunned me. An 8-year-old asking me directly about my financial situation. "Why do you ask me that, sweetie?" "Because Mom says you have so much money you could buy everything we wanted, but you're very selfish and only think about yourself." The silence that followed was so tense it could have been cut with a knife. I looked at Lauren, who had the decency to blush slightly. "Noah," I said in the softest voice I could find, "do you know what selfish means?" The boy shook his head. "It means thinking only of oneself." "Do you think I only think about myself?" Noah looked at me with those big, dark eyes he had inherited from his father. "I don't know, Grandma, but Mom says if you really loved us, you would buy us the things we need." "And what do you think? Do you think that to love you, I need to buy you things?" The boy paused to think for a moment. "My teacher says loving someone is spending time with them and listening to them, not buying them things." "Your teacher is very wise," I said, stroking his cheek. "Noah, come here," Lauren called him sharply. "Don't bother Grandma with your questions." But Noah didn't move. Instead, he asked me, "Grandma, can I stay with you for a while?" "Just us two, like before." Before. When he was little and I took care of him while his parents worked. When he asked me to read him stories and made me drawings that I stuck on the fridge with magnets. When spending time with me was a treat. not an obligation. Of course you can, sweetie. No! Ethan immediately intervened. Noah, we have to go. We have things to do. What things? The boy asked with that persistence characteristic of 8-year-olds. Adult things, Scott replied impatiently. Like planning how to get Grandma to give you more money, a voice said from the doorway. We all turned around. It was Chloe, who had arrived for our planned visit and had been listening from the hall. Chloe, don't say silly things, Tiffany snapped at her. Silly things? Chloe came all the way in and closed the door behind her. I've been listening for an hour from the hall about how you're teaching my cousins that Grandma is bad because she won't give you money. Is that not silly things? Chloe, this is not your business. Ethan intervened. Yes, it is my business. She's my grandma too, and I'm sick of you treating her like a bank. You don't understand the situation, Lauren shouted. What situation? That you can't live without Grandma's money? That you've never learned to manage your own salaries? Enough! Ethan stood up from the sofa. This is ridiculous. Mom, either you come to your senses and help us like you always have, or what? I asked, standing up too. Or we'll have to take more drastic measures. Like what? Ethan and Scott looked at each other. I saw them communicate without words, as they had done since childhood when they were plotting something. Like getting a judge to determine that you are not fit to manage your estate, Scott finally said. The words fell like bombs in the room. The children didn't fully understand what he had said, but they felt the tension and instinctively moved closer to each other. Are you threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent? I asked, feeling the adrenaline rush through my veins. It's not a threat, Mom, Ethan said with false patience. It's a legitimate concern. Your erratic behavior over the past few weeks? My erratic behavior of saying no to your requests. Your erratic behavior of turning into a person we don't recognize, Scott continued. A selfish and spiteful person. Dad, Chloe intervened with a voice trembling with rage. Did you just threaten Grandma with taking away her money if she doesn't give you what you want? Chloe, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, my granddaughter yelled. I understand that it's you who has become unrecognizable. The Grandma I know is generous and loving, but she also has the right to say no. There was absolute silence. Even the little children had stopped moving. Very well, I finally said, with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Now I know exactly who I am dealing with. I walked to the desk and pulled out the envelope I had prepared that morning. This is my new will, I announced, holding up the document. In it, I leave my entire estate to a foundation that will help elderly women abandoned by their families. Not a single dollar goes to you. The looks on their faces were worth more than all the dividends of my investments combined. And if you try to declare me incompetent, I continued, you will discover that just yesterday I passed a full psychological evaluation with Dr. Evans, the same psychiatrist who treated you both when you were teenagers. Result? Perfectly sane and competent. Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Do you know the saddest thing? I asked them. That today, in front of your own children, you have shown me that you would rather destroy your mother than respect her. I turned toward the grandchildren. Children, you are always welcome in this apartment, individually, to spend time with me, not to ask me for things, because I care about you as people, not as means to get money from me. Let's go, Ethan muttered, heading toward the door. The others followed him like zombies, except Chloe, who stayed by my side. Before leaving, Tiffany turned around. This isn't over, Eleanor. You're right, I replied. It's just beginning. After they left, Chloe and I stayed hugging in the middle of the living room for what felt like an eternity. My granddaughter was trembling, and I realized she had witnessed something no teenager should see, her own parents threatening her grandmother. Are they really going to try to take away your money? She asked softly. They can try, I replied, stroking her hair. But they won't succeed. How can you be so sure? I pulled back a little to look her in the eyes. Because for the first time in my life, Chloe, I am 3 steps ahead of them. For years, I reacted to what they did to me. Now, I am anticipating what they are going to do. I poured her a glass of milk and placed the freshly baked cookies on a plate. We sat in the kitchen, where the afternoon light created a warmer atmosphere than the battleground my living room had become. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Aren't you afraid of being lonely?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Of course I was afraid. I had spent 40 years being necessary to someone, being the center of a small family universe that revolved around me. The idea that this universe might disappear was terrifying. "I am absolutely terrified," I admitted. "But I've discovered something, sweetie. It's better to be alone than to be in bad company." Bad company? When people only come to you because they need something, you aren't truly accompanied. You're being used. And that is a much deeper loneliness than being physically alone. Chloe chewed a cookie thoughtfully. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she continued. "It's not that they threatened me. It's that they did it in front of their own children. That they are teaching them that it's okay to extort people you love if you have power over them. My cousins don't really understand what happened, do they? Not completely. But they are learning that money is more important than respect. And that breaks my heart." That night, after Chloe left, but not before promising to visit me the following week, just because I want to, not because I need anything, I sat down to plan my new life. I took out a new notebook and wrote on the first page, "Eleanor Vance, Second Act." On the following pages, I started making lists. Things I wanted to do but never had. Places I wanted to visit. People I wanted to reconnect with. Ways to use my time that didn't involve being useful to others. The first note was, trip to Santorini with Diane. The second, painting classes. The third, learn Italian. For the first time in decades, I was making plans that did not revolve around the needs of others. The following days were strangely quiet. Not a call from my sons. No texts. Not even those surprise visits that used to fray my nerves. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them, and I found that I liked that invisibility. On Tuesday, I called Diane. "Are you still planning that trip to Greece?" I asked without preamble. "Eleanor, what a surprise!" "Yes, I leave next month." "Why? Is there room for a completely novice travel companion in this whole traveling for pleasure thing?" The silence on the other end made me think I had made a mistake. "Are you telling me you want to come with me to Santorini?" "That is exactly what I'm telling you." Diane screamed with joy so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Of course, it'll be fantastic. But what happened? Last week you seemed tied hand and foot to your family." I cut the cord. That afternoon, I went to the travel agency. I had never been inside one before. George and I had only taken 2 trips in our entire life together, both to visit relatives. The idea of traveling for pleasure had always seemed like an unattainable or unnecessary luxury. The agent, a young woman with contagious enthusiasm, showed me pictures of Santorini that looked like paintings. White houses hanging off cliffs, golden sunsets over the blue sea, terraces with infinite views. "It's a perfect destination for women who want to reinvent themselves," she told me with a smile. "Is this your first time traveling alone?" "First time traveling for myself," I corrected. The trip, including flights, hotel, and meals, cost $2,000, an amount that previously would have seemed like a frivolous and irresponsible expense. Now it felt like an investment in my happiness. I pulled out my credit card without hesitation. "When can we leave?" On Thursday morning, while having breakfast on my balcony reading a guide to Greece, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery person with a certified envelope. Inside were legal documents. My sons had hired an attorney. I read the papers with a mix of fascination and disgust. Essentially, they alleged that I was suffering from cognitive impairment, and that my erratic financial decisions put at risk not only my well-being, but the future of the entire family. They requested a judicial evaluation of my mental capacity and the appointment of a guardian to manage my estate. The proposed guardian was Ethan. For a moment, I felt my breath catch. Not out of fear, but because of the sheer audacity of what they were attempting. They wanted to legally steal everything George and I had built, and they were doing it under the guise of protecting my well-being. I immediately called Dr. Evans. "Mrs. Vance," she said in her calm voice, "I was expecting your call. Did you receive the documents?" "I received them. Did you too?" "Yes. They are asking me to ratify your supposed cognitive decline. Of course, my response will be exactly the opposite. What should I do? I've already hired the best family law attorney in the city. Her name is Rebecca Hayes. She has specific experience in cases of family financial abuse. Can you come to my office tomorrow so you can meet her? That night, instead of feeling defeated, I felt energized. My children had completely underestimated their mother. They thought they could intimidate me as they had for years, that I would back down from the legal threat. They didn't know that the woman who had managed municipal budgets of millions of dollars for 40 years was perfectly capable of handling a legal battle. The next day, I met Rebecca Hayes. She was a woman in her mid-40s, with the intelligent gaze of someone who had seen every possible form of familial cruelty disguised as love. "Mrs. Vance," she said after reviewing all the documents, "this is one of the clearest cases of elder financial abuse I have ever seen. Your sons have documented their own greed so thoroughly that they have essentially built our case for us." She showed me a folder. "Here are the records of all the transfers you've made to them over the last 5 years. Over $200,000 in total. No contracts, no repayment deadlines, no guarantees. That's not cognitive impairment. That's extreme generosity. And the fact that I now refuse to give them more money? That is called recovered sanity." Rebecca smiled. "And the timing of your refusal, right after the public humiliation at the Halloween party, is perfectly documented in the photos they themselves uploaded to social media. The witch hat photos? Perfect evidence of emotional abuse. A judge is going to see those images and immediately understand why a 68-year-old woman decided she'd finally had enough. For the first time in weeks," I laughed. "Do you know the best part?" Rebecca continued. "Your sons probably spent a fortune on this attorney. Money they don't have. Betting that you would chicken out and give them what they want to avoid the legal scandal. And what's going to happen? They are going to lose. Completely. And they are going to have to pay legal fees for both sides." That night, for the first time since George's death, I felt truly powerful. Not powerful because I had money, but because I finally knew how to protect myself from those who wanted to harm me. My children had declared war, but they didn't know they had already lost it. 6 months later, I am sitting on a terrace in Santorini, watching the most beautiful sunset I have ever seen. The sky is painted with oranges and pinks reflecting on the Aegean Sea, and for the first time in decades, I am not rushing anywhere, nor do I have obligations waiting for me at home. Diane is next to me, laughing as she tells me about the Greek man she met yesterday at the market who invited her to dinner. She's 70 years old and acts like a teenager in love. It is beautiful to see her this way. "Do you know what I love most about this trip?" I ask her, taking a sip of my ouzo. "What?" "That no one knows where I am. No one can call me asking for money, favors, or solutions to problems that aren't mine. The trial ended 3 months ago. Rebecca was right. It was a crushing victory. The judge not only declared that I was perfectly sane and competent, but ordered my sons to pay all legal expenses and characterized them as unscrupulous opportunists in his official ruling. But the most satisfying part wasn't winning the lawsuit. It was seeing their faces when they realized they had lost not only the money they expected to inherit, but also the loans the attorney had given them to finance the case, trusting they would win and could pay him with my estate. Ethan had to sell his house in Darien. The $50,000 kitchen he wanted so badly was never installed. Scott lost his job again when his boss found out about the legal scandal. Tiffany had to ask her parents for rent money. And I finally learned the difference between being necessary and being valued. The Haven of Dignity Foundation opened its doors 2 months ago. It's a beautiful house in a serene location outside the city, surrounded by gardens where the women can grow their own flowers and vegetables. There are 15 private rooms, a library, art workshops, and most importantly, an environment where being older doesn't mean being invisible. The first resident was Maria, a 75-year-old woman whose children had placed her in a miserable assisted living facility after taking her pension. When she came to us, she barely spoke and flinched every time someone approached her. Now she runs the sewing workshop and laughs so loudly you can hear it from the garden. The second was Hope, who had been living in her daughter's house, sleeping on the couch and caring for 5 grandchildren while her daughter and son-in-law went out every night. When she tried to protest her exhaustion, they threatened to throw her out. Now Hope is learning to paint and says it's the first time in her life she's had a space that is entirely her own. There are other stories. Too many. Women who discovered that raising children doesn't guarantee respect in old age. Women who sacrificed everything for families who saw them as renewable resources rather than people entitled to dignity. But there are also beautiful stories, like that of Pat, who, at 80 years old, is learning to use the internet to talk to other women her age around the world, or that of Connie, who wrote and published a book of poems about the freedom she found at 72. My favorite story, however, is Chloe's. My granddaughter came to see me the week before my trip. She hadn't spoken to her parents since the trial, a decision that I know caused her pain, but that I completely respect. "Grandma," she told me as we walked through the Foundation's gardens, "I want to ask you something important. Tell me, sweetie, can I come live with you when I finish high school? Not to ask you for money or to solve my life, just to be near someone who understands what it means to respect herself." I stopped in the middle of the gravel path. "Are you sure? Your parents?" "My parents taught me that loving someone means using them. You are teaching me that loving someone means respecting them. I prefer your version of love." That conversation confirmed something I had been feeling for months. I hadn't lost a family. I had gained the freedom to choose who deserved my love. The other grandchildren? It's complicated. Liam and Noah, the twins, write me letters occasionally. They are sweet letters where they tell me about school and draw me flowers. They don't ask for anything. They just tell me they miss me. I always reply. And when I return from Greece, I will invite them to spend a day at the Foundation. I want them to see that grandmothers can be more than ATMs. Sarah, the older one, is more influenced by her parents. But I trust that someday she will understand the difference between conditional and unconditional love. My sister, Diane, who lives in Florida, called me a month ago to apologize. She had finally understood what really happened after talking to Chloe. "Eleanor," she told me tearfully over the phone, "I didn't realize they were treating you so badly. I thought you were the one being difficult." I explained that I didn't need apologies. I just needed her to understand that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's survival. Now Diane visits me every month, not to ask for anything, but because she genuinely enjoys my company. It's strange and wonderful to have a family relationship without unilateral obligations. But the biggest transformation has been in myself. This morning I woke up at 10 because I wanted to, not because someone needed me. I had Eggs Benedict at the hotel because I felt like it, not because it was cheap. I bought a turquoise blue dress because it made me feel beautiful, not because it was practical. For the first time in my life, my decisions are mine. The money I used to spend maintaining my children's whims is now invested in my own happiness and in helping women who have gone through the same thing I have. It is an intoxicating feeling to discover that you have resources when you stop wasting them on people who don't value them. Tomorrow, Diane and I will take a ferry to Mykonos. The day after, we'll go to Athens to see the Parthenon. Next week, we'll return to Manhattan, but not to the life I left. We will return to the life I have chosen to build. A life where I am the protagonist, not a supporting character. A life where my needs matter as much as anyone else's. A life where no is a complete sentence that requires no explanation. The sun is setting completely now, and the terrace is filled with that golden light that makes everything seem possible. The tourists around me are taking photos, but I simply observe. At 68, I have learned that some moments are too perfect to capture. They can only be lived. "What are you thinking about?" Diane asks me. That it took me 68 years to meet the woman I was always supposed to be. And what is that woman like? I smile as the last ray of sun disappears on the horizon. She is someone who loves herself as much as she loves others. She is someone who understands that giving without limits is not generosity. It is self-destruction. She is someone who knows she deserves respect, not for what she can give, but for the simple fact of existing. She sounds like a very wise woman. She sounds like a very free woman. Tonight, when I go to bed in my hotel room, I won't think about what my family needs tomorrow. I will think about what I want to do tomorrow. And that small difference has changed everything. I have learned that sometimes, to find true love, you have to have the courage to lose the false love. And that chosen solitude is infinitely better than company that makes you feel invisible. Have you ever felt like an ATM for your own family? Or do you know someone living something similar? If so, let me know in the comments. This story needs to reach whoever needs to hear it most. And if it touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Because we all deserve to remember that it's never too late to start valuing ourselves as we should.